We now go to Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A year on from the global pandemic, where we've lost so many of our fellow citizens, and in Tower Hamlets, in my constituency across the borough, we've lost over 518 of our fellow citizens. This pandemic has shown how the deep inequalities in our society have been exacerbated, and those who face severe levels of overcrowding, who suffer from inequality and poverty, being disproportionately affected by this pandemic. And that's why, Madam Deputy Speaker, it was so important for this government in this Queen's speech to ensure that we have an ambitious programme to protect our citizens, to bounce back, to recover from what has been the most unprecedented of crises not seen since the Second World War, and the most unprecedented economic hit on our country for hundreds of years. It's why it's so deeply disappointing that the government hasn't gone far enough to address the social and affordable housing crisis in our communities. In Tower Hamlets, we have over 20,000 people on the housing waiting list. And when the pandemic hit, the first thing I said to our Chancellor when he came to the Treasury Select Committee was that in areas like mine, where the risk factors are higher because of high levels of health inequality, the risk factors are even greater because of high levels of a severe overcrowding, where if the infection comes your way within a household, it's impossible to self-isolate. And we saw that over the past year, not only in my constituency, but across our city and across communities where families live in severe overcrowding. That's why, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's so important that the government actually introduces proper funding and proper support and empowers local authorities with backing and finance, working with social housing organisations to be able to build, to have a building programme for affordable housing, genuinely affordable housing, but also social housing. We've not seen that. The planning reforms are not going to help that process. What we've seen is a government that's much happier to be in the pockets of developers. And we've seen that in the scandal that came about last year to do with property deals and planning permissions, and more recent ones as well that we've seen in the papers. What we need is a government on the side of the public to build homes that are safe, which takes me on to the issue of the cladding crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker. Any government should have at the forefront of its responsibilities the duty to protect its citizens, protection from the likes of what we've seen with the Grenfell fire disaster. It was an absolute catastrophe for those who lived in that block. And what we saw more recently in Tower Hamlets was a fire in the block in the constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Poplar and Limehouse in New Providence Wharf. And the Sunday Times recently reported that it was only minutes away from being another Grenfell disaster. And yet what we've seen is tens of thousands of people, not only in my borough, but across the country, who still haven't had cladding removed and haven't had their homes being made safe by this government. So once again, I call on this government to get its act together. 4 years have passed since the Grenfell disaster, and yet we still have fires, we still have the risk. We nearly had another Grenfell disaster in Tower Hamlets. I call on this government to set a timeline, set a timetable urgently to get rid of the flammable cladding and other risks to people's homes, and for support the Labour amendment today. Thank you.